So we are really lucky to be at an institution that has given faculty a choice over their teaching modalities. Yes, we were given a handful of types of modalities from which to choose, but in general, faculty were given the choice of whether they wanted to teach online or in person or something in between. Many of you have chosen to teach in person or to teach in a traditional blended modality. And so this means many of you have been asking us questions about how to design in those modalities. And one of the things we have said and that we have encouraged our peer facilitators to share in their peer learning communities is that the first thing we recommend everyone do is to imagine that they are teaching a fully online course regardless of the modalities they've chosen, and to design that fully online course regardless of the modalities they've chosen. And we've heard a lot of questions about that, sort of not understanding why, and a little bit of sort of resistance, thinking, I don't have much time this summer, and we know you don't. And so you're thinking, I should design for the modality that I've chosen. But we want to caution against that, and we have three particular reasons for that, and that's what I want to share with you in this short video today. So the first reason, this is not a surprise to any of you, is that plans are changing. We see this in the news all over the place in terms of schools changing their mind. We see this with K through 12, and we've said all along that we need to be nimble and that we might have to shift away from in-person teaching and in-person residency back to fully online as we did in the spring, whether that's before the semester begins or at some point throughout the semester. And one of the things we know is that we don't want to have what happened to us in the spring happen again, where we're scrambling in a week to learn a whole bunch of new tools and to develop digital activities and projects for our students in the space of a weekend. So we also know that if you design all of your online materials, that it's actually quite easy to pivot in a weekend in the other direction. So if you spend time now developing a fully online course and it turns out that things are looking up and that students do come back to this class and that you do get to teach an in-person class or a blended course, good news. It may take 15 minutes to take your online activity and translate it to an in-person environment. So it just makes good sense to start with online for the sake of these shifting plans. But one of the things that I think a lot of us are not thinking about, and so I just want to remind you all and emphasize again, is that even if we are back in a residential campus and our students are back on campus, one of the ways that we're going to stay healthy and contain the virus is through a rigorous process of isolation and quarantine, where students who have been found to have COVID-19 are isolated, and those with whom they've come into contact are quarantined for 2 weeks at a time. And given how much our students interact, this means that upwards of 20%, perhaps even more of our student body may be in quarantine for 2 weeks at a time. And so you may have half of your class, perhaps even all of your class, that are not able to come to your in-person or blended in-person sessions. And so you will have to have prepared for them some sort of online activities and ways of accessing the material for those 2 weeks. Now, if it was just one student, you could come up with a little bit of a mix like you do for students with mono. But if you have your entire class that will be out for 2 weeks, it's really important that you're prepared with things that they can do that are high quality, that don't require them being in person. And then the final thing to say is that we also think that designing online first is not just good for your workload in terms of the pivot in both cases 1 and 2, but it's also especially good for the workload of those of you that have chosen blended modalities with rotating cohorts. And that's because with rotating cohorts, you're going to have to repeat what you do in those cohorts. And if you're doing the heavy lifting, really difficult sort of teaching and engagement in that cohort session, and you have to repeat it again, that's just duplicating your workload, and that's something that we definitely don't want to do. But if you move those activities to online and you make sure that all students get those activities in an online course, then you can treat your face-to-face cohorted sections as supplemental, as problem sets, discussions, small group office hours, and we'll say more about this in a later video, but the point here is that it takes much less time to teach a blended course with rotating cohorts in that framework if you have a fully well-designed online course. So I hope these three reasons have convinced you that this is probably the wise practice, is to start by preparing a fully online course, and we'll have more to say about the other modalities in the future videos.